All right, it's 8:30 on the dot, starting pretty close to exactly the right time for this week's Panther-Lair Show here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Of course, while you're here, make sure you're liking this video and clicking subscribe. I'm going to ask you to do that a bunch of times because we always do. That's what I ask you to do. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's our last live show, I shouldn't say our last live show because we'll have one on Friday evening, but it's our last midweek live Panther-Lair show of 2022. Feels like the year's gone by pretty quickly, but at the same time, it also feels like a really long time ago. I was thinking today about sort of reflecting back. I mean, obviously, I'm writing for this week's 321 column, and actually in tomorrow's morning Pitt, I'm going to be talking about it, just sort of reflecting back on 2022. And I was thinking back to like January, February, particularly February with the basketball team, how they were on like a 4-game losing streak, and then they won at Florida State, and they beat NC State at home, and then they won at North Carolina. And it was like, wow, there might be something really going here. They might actually have a little bit of momentum. Maybe they figured some things out. This might be all right. And they were coming home to play Georgia Tech on a Saturday afternoon. And it was like the perfect setup. I mean, Georgia Tech was bad. And, it was a Saturday afternoon, and it could have been a decent crowd. I forget how many. I don't think as many showed up as I thought there was going to be, given the team winning 3 in a row and playing a game that they should probably win. But it was a decent crowd. And they just laid a total egg and ended up losing every game the rest of the way and got beat by 20 by Boston College in the ACC tournament. So that didn't exactly go the way it was supposed to. But, you go all the way back to January, February, all through the spring, summer, fall, and here we are at the end of the year. And like I say, tomorrow's morning Pitt is going to have a lot of year-end recap, just kind of looking back over the year that was. 321 column on Panther-Lair.com on Friday. The website. I probably should mention that. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You can find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, message boards where there's conversation and interaction all day long. The message boards at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. I mean, Pitt fans are on there all day, every day, literally 24 hours a day, posting new messages, starting new topics, new threads, and just talking about Pitt sports. And I think if you're watching this, live stream, or you're listening to the podcast or watching the video later in the week, I mean, that's probably what you'd like to do as well, is talk to other Pitt fans about Pitt sports and get in on those conversations. So if that's what you want to do, I highly recommend that you join the most, the best online community of Pitt sports fans that you're going to find. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. I mean, it's all right there across the bottom of the screen. That's not a link, so don't click that, but just type all those letters into your browser and go to the website, Panther-Lair.com. So, like I said, we're going to do a lot of the year-end recap stuff over the next 2 days. So, I mean, we could do a little bit of that here tonight if you have you can tell us what memory sticks out the most for you from 2022. Is there sort of a lasting image? I'm going to kind of hold mine back unless we just sort of get on that topic, just because I'm going to talk about it in the morning Pit tomorrow, and so we'll sort of save the big reveal for then of what the lasting image of 2022 is for me, or has been for me. But I'm curious what what really stands out to you from this year. Mixed bag for Pitt athletics overall. Some really strong performances from programs like volleyball and the 2 soccer teams, to some disappointing teams that fell short of expectations, football, and then some teams that were just downright bad in 2022. And Pitt sort of ran the gamut there in the athletic department of all levels of success. So you have a lasting memory from 2022. You can put that in the comment section right over there. There it is. It's on the right-hand side of the screen. Put your comments there, your questions there, and we'll get to that stuff here shortly and get that conversation, that back and forth going. On the news front, I feel like we should start with this news, and I think there probably will be a lot of comments and questions about this, actually, and I'd like to hear from you about it because, the news is one thing. The reaction is something else, and I think they're both interesting for their own reasons. The news, of course, is Dior Johnson reinstated to the Pitt basketball team. This news came out today. Pitt announced it this afternoon. They announced that Dior Johnson can start practicing again, but he's likely to redshirt. And there's really, like I said, there's the news and then there's the response. But within the news, there's kind of two paths, and they sort of intersect with the response a little bit. There's two paths of the news, right? There's the basketball side, and then there's the non-basketball side. And both sort of merit discussion. And I'm much better when it comes to having opinions on sports. So I have opinions on the basketball side. The other side of what should be done in terms of Dior Johnson's position as a member of the University of Pittsburgh men's basketball program, his position as a student at the University of Pittsburgh. That stuff I have a little bit harder time with opinion-wise, but if you have yours, I'd like to hear it. Because what's been interesting to me, and I'll go to the response side of this thing, what's been interesting to me has been to see the response from Pitt fans really dating back to Dior Johnson's arrest in the beginning of October. His arrest in the beginning of October at what at the time were felony domestic assault charges. Those charges eventually reduced down to misdemeanors that led to guilty pleas from him, where he copped to some, according to his own admission, some pretty bad actions. And so the response from Pitt fans, and it's been interesting for me to sort of witness this, and keeping in mind that we're looking at people who are commenting on social media, people who are commenting on the message boards, which does not represent a majority of Pitt fans. It's not even a majority of Pitt fans who are on Twitter or on message boards or on Facebook. There's a lot of them on Twitter and a lot of them on message boards and a lot of them on Facebook, but it's not a majority of the Pitt fan base. And so we keep that in mind, that we're talking about the vocal portion, a vocal minority probably of the Pitt fan base. And then some percentage of that group has come out. I see a decent amount of strong opinions saying they don't want Dior Johnson back. And that's really interesting to me, because so often I feel like in this is the circles that we run in, this is the echo chambers that we create, whether it's on a message board or on Twitter, or on Facebook. So often I feel like there's a sports above everything mentality. And that's from Pitt fans, that's from all sports fans. Most sports fans of a team, are willing to overlook things in the name of sports, right? But there's been a strong reaction of Pitt fans, and there's been a strong contingent of Pitt fans, again, among the social media, the vocal social media group. There's been a strong reaction saying, no, we don't want this guy back. No, we don't need him to play here anymore. He shouldn't be on campus or whatnot. And again, I don't think that's the majority of Pitt fans. But there is a group out there with that opinion. It's been interesting to see that, it's not always just sports above everything. That's been really interesting for me to see. And again, it's hard for me to get into opinion one way or the other on what Pitt should do. I think they have procedures for this and protocols for this, and they can make their decisions on their own based on how they evaluate the situation. Obviously, they've decided to reinstate Dior Johnson as a member of the basketball program, and who's practicing with the team but won't play. Is it effectively a suspension under another name? A year-long suspension under another name? Maybe. Is it, what everyone views as being in the best interest here? Maybe. Is it maybe the best decision basketball-wise? Possibly. He hasn't practiced since, the end of September. So he's been out of practice for 3 months and hasn't really been around the team at all. To then bring him in and throw him right onto the court on a team that's sort of established a chemistry and established a way of gelling and working together. I don't know if that would be, it might be in everyone's best interest to just keep him on the sidelines, let him focus on becoming part of the team, and let him focus on getting his whatever it is in order. So there's a lot of angles to it, and I'd like to see your thoughts on this, and I might even check out the comments and questions, see what people are saying about see what people are saying about see what people are saying about the Dior Johnson situation, and we'll see some comments and questions come in. Actually, we'll just I'll let you guys post your comments and questions about Dior Johnson and what you think. It's an interesting situation, and to be honest, like I've wondered for a while how it was going to work when they brought Dior Johnson back. Like I thought he would be back at some point this season. Was my guess that eventually it would get worked out, it would get resolved. The legal situation was resolved, and I thought after that, at some point, he would be back on the court and he would play in games. But I kept looking at this team. I said, boy, with the top 7 they've established right now, and this doesn't include John Hughley. This is Nelly Cummings, Jamarius Burton, and Greg Elliott, Nike Sabandi, Blake Hinson, and Federico, and Jorge Diaz-Graham. With that 7, they've really established a chemistry. Yeah, I mean, they know how to play together. They know how to win together, and they have been winning. I think, and you've seen it sort of develop over the course of the season. They didn't really have it together at the beginning of the year, first 5 games. But they've gotten it, and it's come together, and they're playing pretty well together. They know how to operate. And to bring another personality into that, to bring another presence into that, when it's someone who hasn't been around the team for the last 3 months, I wondered what that would do to the chemistry. Not in the sense of, he'd be a poison or a cancer in the locker room or anything like that. Just more of a, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Don't upset the apple cart when you've got it rolling really well. And so Dior Johnson's obviously a very talented player, but I just wondered if, I wondered how he would work back in. And to be honest, I have some of the same questions, not to this, quite the degree, but some of the same questions about John Hughley. I mean, he has not really been a significant part of the team for the better part of this season. Hasn't even played the last couple of games. And it sounds like he's up in the air for the Carolina game on Friday. And so, I have questions about how when Hughley gets back to starter minutes, which I assume is going to happen, how is he going to mesh with what they've, as Jeff Capel said, they learned how to play without him. And they learned how to play without him when he was actually out, when he was still hurt and he had the brace and he couldn't practice in October and November. And they learned how to play without him. And I think they've been learning how to play without John Hughley for the last couple of weeks, and learning how to play well and learning how to succeed. I mean, everyone I think agrees that one of the biggest surprises this season has been Federico and how he's played. And we'll see what happens once he gets into full-blown game-to-game ACC play. But he has developed nicely. He's found a place with this team. Guys like Blake Hinson and Nelly Cummings have emerged. Jamarius Burton has established his role. Nike Sabandi coming off the bench. Greg Elliott knows what he does. And ideally, all these things should work well with Hughley when he gets back on the court and commands the attention that he's inevitably going to command. And then he can kick out to those shooters, or those shooters can be such a threat that they've established themselves by now that teams won't double team Hughley. They won't throw all the pressure and attention to Hughley that they've been doing for so long. And he'll be able to have more success or easier success than he's had in the past few years. It should all work, but they've got something going right now. And when you throw someone like John Hughley back into it, everybody's going to have to adjust. And you'd rather not be adjusting in that way in January. Now, again, if you can add a talented player back to your roster, you can add someone who should have all conference, potential or all conference, pedigree. You want to do that because it's going to make you better. But there is something to be said for chemistry and having guys working together who know how to work together, who know how to win together, which is where this team is right now. So that's a really interesting question to me. It was one of the interesting questions I always had about, when Dior Johnson came back, of how he was going to do. And I have that question to some extent about Hughley as well. But, I think with Johnson, there's a lot more to it than just that basketball question. And look, the reality is, if this plan holds, if he redshirts this year, he doesn't play it all this season, I don't think it's cynical to ask the question of whether you think he'll ever play for Pitt. And first of all, it's not based on any kind of inside information at all. I'm not hearing any kind of rumors or any. We don't even know if Dior is going to be around next year. It's just the reality of college basketball. It's just the reality. And that's not to say that I think he's going to go or that it's most likely that he'll go. but it'll be a real question until he steps on the court next season in a Pitt basketball game. It'll be a real question. And, particularly when he's not playing this year. If they stick to this redshirt plan, you start to wonder if it'll ever happen. Now, they're going to lose guards after this year. Jamarius Burton's going to be done. Nelly Cummings is going to be done. I think Nike Sabandi's going to be done. This is an opportunity for a guy like Dior Johnson to step in next year as a redshirt freshman and take over the team. Be the guy at point guard. If you get John Hughley back, if you have Blake Hinson, and you have Elliott plus Dior Johnson. You've got a foundation. You've got a core that could be pretty good, but that depends on a few guys making certain decisions, and certainly Dior Johnson is one of them. So I think at this point, and the last thing I'll say sort of during this part about the Dior Johnson situation is I think, not that we're going to put it to bed, but I don't think there's much else that'll be said here throughout the rest of the season. And the next sort of relevant Dior Johnson news will be either he leaves the team or he's set to be the guy in 2022 or 23, I guess, next season. I think we'll see what happens in that situation as it goes forward. Other news, just heading toward the Sun Bowl. Nick Patty's going to be the starter. I think that's what we expected. Rodney Hammond's the starter. That's what we expected. They're practicing this week. Doing some deep, in-depth investigative journalism as we look at all the videos and photos that get released from El Paso. Certainly looks like Vincent Davis is preparing for his last game as a Pitt Panther. Haba Baldonado preparing for his last game as a Pitt Panther. Those are probably two of the bigger guys that we've got questions about. Jared Wayne, there's a huge question about, but no real indication being given yet. He's playing on Friday, but don't know what he's going to be doing after that. And to be honest, I ask around, and nobody seems to know. Maybe somebody knows, but they're not saying. Nobody's saying anything. Jared Wayne himself certainly is not saying what he intends to do. But, sort of given the close frame-by-frame Zapruder breakdown of, a couple videos that came out from El Paso today, I would say that it looks like Haba Baldonado not only is done, he went through the senior line. It looked like he was shaking everyone's hands as a departing senior, but it also looked like he's not really practicing either. So I'm going to guess you're not going to see Haba Baldonado in the Sun Bowl. And so you add him to a list that, at defensive end at least, it also includes John Morgan and Deslin Alexandra. And you've got your top three defensive ends are out, most likely. Morgan and Alexandra are already gone. Baldonado, it looks like he's not going to play. And so, I think one of the positions I was most interested in heading into this Sun Bowl just after the departures of Morgan and Alexandra it's even more interesting with Baldonado gone. Now, you might say, interesting, sounds like they're going to struggle. Maybe. But it's going to be interesting to be able to see some of these younger defensive ends. I'm looking forward to seeing what Deion Hayes does. He had a big game at Miami. Let's see if he can build on that. I'm looking forward to seeing what Bam Brima can do. I'm looking forward to seeing what Nakai Johnson can do. Samuel Okunlola shows up on the two deep this week as a true freshman. He's played a handful of games, some on defense, some special teams this season. He'll still redshirt, but I expect him to play a lot in this Sun Bowl, and I want to see what he can do. There were some rave reviews about Sam Okunlola in spring camp and over the summer before he got hurt in August. Let's see what he can do. I'm really curious to see him get on the field and maybe show some of that potential. Now, we can sit here on Wednesday and talk about how exciting it is to get a chance to see all these freshmen and young guys when they go out there on Friday. If they get pushed around by UCLA's offensive tackles all game, it's going to be a little less exciting to watch. But I'm looking forward to seeing it. Kyle Lewis is another freshman who showed up on the two deep with Servassier Dennis out. Shane Simon moved from money linebacker to middle linebacker. Tyler Wiltz moved out to that starting money linebacker spot, leaves open a spot on the two deep at least, behind Bengali Kamara at star linebacker, and there's Kyle Lewis. He's played, I think, 3 games this season, mostly on special teams, but he's going to be the backup star linebacker in this, at least as it's listed. Now, they're going to be able to move guys around, and they're going to move guys around. Shane Simon is Shane Simon's going to be the starting middle linebacker, but Brandon George will be back for this game as well. He only played 3 games this year, hasn't played since like maybe the Rhode Island game due to injury. So he's going to be back as the reserve, the top backup middle linebacker. So I think if they want to move guys around, Simon could slide back out to the money linebacker. George could step up at the middle linebacker. Wiltz could play star linebacker. You know, guys can move around. They might not need Kyle Lewis. They might be able to go with Simon, George, Wiltz, Kamara, and Solomon DeShields as your 5 linebackers and rotate through those 5 and get them all, take care of what you need to take care of just with those 5 guys. But I'd like to see it. I'd like to see the freshman Kyle Lewis and see what he can do, to get him some snaps, let him play in a game. So the boundary safety spot is going to be interesting too. Javon McIntyre, huge game at Miami. And now he's going to be the starting boundary safety with Stephon Hall behind him. Let's see those guys. Brandon Hill is gone. Judson Townder is gone. Let's see what McIntyre and Hall can do. I think fans always like to say, well, let's see what that young guy can do. Well, you're going to find out. Largely on defense. I don't think, not as much on offense. Even though you'll have Nick Patty and Rodney Hammond out there as the starters at quarterback and running back, you know who those guys are. I think you know what those guys can do. So it's not like there's a big, oh man, can't wait to finally see Nick Patty. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing Nick Patty, but we've seen Nick Patty, We've seen Rodney Hammond. We know what those guys can do. And so I don't know if there's as much youth that's going to be on display on offense, aside from maybe like Ryan Baer getting in some snaps at offensive tackle. But on defense, I think there's going to be a lot. I think there's going to be a lot of the future on the field on Friday for Pitt's defense. And that's something to look forward to. It's a little exciting to see what they can do. And I guess this is the final thing I'll say before we get into the comments and questions portion of the show. But there's so much talk from fans about how the opt-outs and the transfers and the guys going to the NFL, how it's ruining bowl season and it's just making it's not fun to watch anymore, and this and that. And I understand it. I understand where that comes from. But I do think it makes it at least a little bit interesting. It's going to be interesting to see all those guys I just mentioned on defense. And I think they're good young players. Well, let's see how they do thrown into the fire against, a top 20 team, a 9-win team. UCLA is no chump. This is a good team that they're going to be playing against. And we'll talk about what their personnel is going to look like, because that's a big question mark as well. It's funny in this game. Pat Narduzzi, the more transparent head coach in this game is going to be on the Pitt sidelines. When's the last time you ever said that? But this is going to be a tough matchup for Pitt's defense. This is a good UCLA offense. They run the ball really well. They're one of the top rushing teams in the country. Pitt's got one of the top rushing defenses in the country, but they had one of the top rushing defenses in the country with Haba Baldonado and John Morgan and Deslin Alexander and Kalijah Cansey and Servassier Dennis and Brandon Hill. Are they going to have one of the top run defenses in the country with Deion Hayes and Bam Brima and Shane Simon and Brandon George and Javon McIntyre? Not so sure. Not so sure how that's going to work out, but I'm kind of interested to see. I'm kind of interested to see. And I'll say this about Nick Patty. Like I say, we've already seen him. He's not part of the future. This is his final game in a Pitt uniform. That all has been made very clear. We're not watching Nick Patty to find out what he can do for Pitt in 2023. We're not watching Nick Patty to get an idea of what our expectations should be about Pitt's offense next year. I'm watching Nick Patty because I want to see a guy who has stayed around here for 5 years, been a good teammate, been a good backup, done everything he can when he's called upon. I want to see him go out with a win. You know what I mean? Like I always say, in this job, you don't root for teams, you root for stories, and sometimes you root for people. You want good people, you want good things to happen to good people. That's sort of a natural human reaction, a natural human emotion, right? And you want good stories. That's part of writing about sports or writing about anything. You want good stories. Nick Patty to go out and have a big game and win the Sun Bowl and go out a winner, that would be a good story. That would be a good thing happening to a good person and creating a good story. And so I would like to see that. And it doesn't have anything to do with Pitt in 2023. It doesn't have anything to do with whether they're going to win the ACC next year or what it means for their offense. It doesn't have anything to do with anything. There's no tangible benefit to Nick Patty playing well in this game, aside from potentially getting a 9th win. Right? There's no nothing of the future is riding on Nick Patty's performance in this game. All it is, and all it's for, and all it's about is Nick Patty getting a chance to go out as a winner. And I can get behind that. I can get behind Nick Patty going out as a winner and having the opportunity to go out as a winner. And when he's been called upon in the past, he's done an admirable job. He threw a touchdown pass in that UCF game in 2019. Remember that? That was a huge win for Pitt and Pat Narduzzi. And he threw a touchdown pass in that game. He threw 2 the next week against Delaware when they barely held on to beat Delaware. That game got a little dicier than expected, probably due to the ultra-conservative play calling. But still, he threw 2 touchdowns in that game. The Florida State game in 2020, ran for a couple goal line touchdowns when Kenny Pickett was still banged up. And then, of course, the Peach Bowl last year. That I think there's a strong consensus, and rightfully so, that Pitt probably would have won that game if he didn't get hurt on the second drive. Shoot, if Pitt, there's 2 what ifs. If Michigan State's game-opening kickoff doesn't hit the ground and die at the 2, giving Pitt possession at the 2, and an impossible situation on the first drive of the game, and then if Nick Patty doesn't get hurt on his touchdown on the second drive of the game, they probably win the Peach Bowl, behind Nick Patty. I think he's more or less delivered when he's been called upon to do so. And, this is his last stand. This is his last opportunity to step in to a situation where they need him to take over for someone. And it's his last chance to sort of go out a winner. So I'm pulling for him. I think it'll be fun to see Nick Patty get a win in this game. I think Rodney Hammond, is due to take over as the starting running back. He was going to have it next year anyway, so it doesn't matter whether it starts one game early or not, but it'll be interesting to see what he does. Sibo Flemister had a big game at Miami. I think they'll be counting on him to run well. And then the receivers. You need Jared Wayne to have a big game like he had in Miami. You need Konate Mumfield to have to play well. You need Bub Means to make a couple catches, and maybe, just maybe, Nick Patty could throw some passes to our long-lost friend El Barto, Gavin Bartholomew. We'll see if Patty is capable of doing that. Whoops. There we go. Something clicked on. I had another tab open, so I apologize if you heard a quick blurb there. All right, I want to get into the comments and questions here during the show. Let's see what we got. There we go. Bring up the chat screen. There it is. Listen, before I do that, though, I got to tell you about our friend Chris Gates. You guys know about Chris Gates, chrisgatesfitness.com. By now, I think you know about Chris and his online fitness coaching business. He's an online fitness coach, and he works with people all over the world to create customized fitness and nutrition programs that work. And he supports his clients every step of the way. Plus, Chris is a huge Pitt fan, and he loves supporting the podcast. Here's the key. In just a few days, 5 days, Chris is going to be opening up applications and accepting new clients from January 2nd to January 8th. 1 week. After that, the applications are going to be closed until late spring or early summer. Now, several Panther-Lair podcast listeners signed up for the coaching at the beginning of the football season, and their transformations have been really impressive. Chris has been tracking this, and it's been really impressive to see. So if you're interested in setting a health or a fitness goal for the new year, and you want to make sure you're not only able to make progress, but sustain that progress, go to chrisgatesfitness.com to learn more. It's Chris, C-H-R-I-S, Gates, G-A-T-E-S, fitness.com to learn more about what Chris offers. And if you go there, you can get 75% off your first month of coaching by mentioning Panther-Lair when you apply. So make sure, keep an eye out for it 5 days from now. All right, Chris is going to open up applications and accept new clients. That's Monday, January 2nd. It's only going to be open until the 8th. All right, Monday to Sunday. It's your chance to get in. Mention Panther-Lair, you get 75% off your first month of coaching. You mention Panther-Lair when you apply. All right, let's get into the comments and questions here. Our friend Walat, you always read Walat, W-L-A-T, that fun message board misspelling of Walt that dates back 25 years or so. You always read it, and I hear it in my head, but I can never actually pronounce it. Walat. Anyway, he asks, are the concessions going to remain open on Friday at the Pitt? Let me look. Quick glance through. I thought I got an email about what's going to happen. Here's the watch party email. Of course, the Pitt, North Carolina game is at noon, and then the Sun Bowl is at 2. If you attend the basketball game, you have an opportunity to remain at the Peterson Event Center to watch the Sun Bowl in its duration. Fans with Campus View Club access will be permitted to watch the football game there, while courtside club ticket holders will have the option to view the game from the courtside suite or move to the Campus View Club. The Pitt UCLA game will also be shown on the center video board on all concourse TVs and on the video board in Thomas E. Richards Family Lobby. Food and alcohol sales will continue through the basketball game and until the end of the third quarter of the Sun Bowl. So yeah, you can get your concessions at the Peterson Event Center during the watch party up until the third quarter of the football game. Let's see here. RJCman38 is a super chatter, but I don't know where your comment is, so I'll keep an eye out for that as I scroll through. Josh Newark says, Chris, enjoyed the morning pit today with the UCLA guy. You mentioned a lot of UCLA players maybe just dressing and not playing. Could you state which positions those guys play at? Quarterback is the only one I know. So there's two. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the quarterback, and Zach Charbonnet, the running back. And Charbonnet, 1,300 yards in 10 games this season. He's really good. He's a big part of why their offense has been so good. He's a big part of why they have like a top 5 rushing offense in the country. He has not said anything about what he's going to do. Chip Kelly keeps saying, well, we expect, right now I believe those guys plan to play. Speaking of Thompson-Robinson and Zach Charbonnet. And it's just shocking. It's completely shocking and goes counter to everything everyone. It runs counter to everything that everyone believes or seems to know about college football in 2022. Guys of that stature just don't play in bowl games. I mean, Zach Charbonnet hasn't even announced he's going to the NFL, but he is. Everyone seems to know that. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I think, has said that he's going to the NFL. He's like a 4th-year guy or a 5th-year guy. He could play another year, but he said he's going to the NFL. And those guys typically don't play. I mean, it's atypical. I mean, Charbonnet is one of the top 1 or 2 running backs in the draft, as of right now, is how he's projected. And to play in the bowl game? Dorian Thompson-Robinson said he's talked to the media once since the season ended. Charbonnet hasn't talked at all. And he said that he's still, at that point, this was a couple weeks ago, he said he was still deciding what he was going to do with the Sun Bowl. He was talking to his family and his advisors and agents. And I mean, if you talk to your family and your advisors and your agents, they're all going to tell you don't play. So I don't know what to expect out of this game. It's the wildest thing. And we had Tracy McDonald from BruinBlitz.com, the UCLA Rivals site, was a guest on the Morning Pit today. You should go check that video out. And he was talking about how, like, UCLA brought the entire roster to El Paso, like everybody. And that means guys who have declared for the NFL, guys who have gone into the transfer portal, everybody is there. And I don't think they're all going to play, but they're all there. And it's remarkable. Like, there's a part of me that really believes Chip Kelly is trying to engage in gamesmanship here. Look, if you look at the UCLA players who have declared for the NFL, who said they're going to leave early, they're going to go to the NFL, not one of their announcements, and I've looked at a few, and they look like they were school produced, not one of their announcements mentions the Sun Bowl. Playing or not playing. Not one. They all just talk about how they're going to forego the rest of their eligibility and play and go to the NFL. They don't say anything about whether they're playing in the bowl game. Everybody else across the country says whether they're going to play in the bowl game or not, except the UCLA guys. I mean, there might be other guys, but I mean, like, everyone I look at, everybody from Pitt who made the announcement, Eric Hallett said he's going to the NFL, but he is going to play. Servassier Dennis and Izzy Abanikanda and Brandon Hill said they're going to the NFL. They're not going to play. Guys all over the country saying they're going to the NFL, they will or they won't. Except UCLA. They're just saying they're going to the NFL. And then, if you watch that interview with Tracy today on the Morning Pitt, he said that, Zach Charbonnet, the running back, missed 2 games this season due to injury. And in both games, he was in uniform and on the sidelines. So it will not be a shock at all to go into this game on Friday, see Zach Charbonnet in full uniform, going through warm-ups, preparing just like he would for any game, and then standing there on the sidelines with his helmet on and his full pads and never getting on the field. Just out of gamesmanship. And it would not surprise me at all if Chip Kelly asked or instructed those guys not to announce anything prior to the game, just to give UCLA an edge. It's funny because we always talk about how Pat Narduzzi is so, secret, so secretive and hates transparency in any form. I mean, he is the more transparent head coach in this game, which is really saying something about Chip Kelly. Now, a brief aside, all right, UCLA hasn't been in a bowl game in 5 years. They haven't won a bowl game in 7 years. And they've only reached 10 wins 9 times in program history. They've played like 95 seasons at UCLA. And they've only won 10 games 9 times. They have a chance to do it this year. They have a chance to win their first bowl game in 7 years this year. And there's a chance that stuff actually means something to these guys. That stuff actually means something to these players. That they want to be part of that history of tying the school record for most wins in a season, of winning a bowl game for the first time since 2015, of playing in a bowl game for the first time since 2017. There's a chance that it really does mean that much to those guys. And that all of this is not subterfuge. That all of this really is going to happen. And Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Zach Charbonnet really are going to play. And these guys who are transferring out and going to the NFL early, they're all going to play. That's why they're in El Paso. There's a chance. I find it highly, highly unlikely because it would fly in the face of everything we've come to see and learn and know about college football in 2022. Seems highly unlikely. All right. Let's move on. David Allen says, I think attendance at college basketball is down pretty much everywhere. That being said, I'm interested to see if Pitt can improve attendance this season. Yeah, it will be interesting. This Carolina game is going to be tough. Students are on break. It's a Friday afternoon. I don't think attendance is going to be great for this one, which is a shame because they would have an opportunity to have a good attendance, with the team pretty interesting right now and playing a marquee opponent in North Carolina. If they win that game, though, they should be able to start building up some attendance numbers and getting people in for some of the upcoming home games. They have a real chance. I think they have Virginia coming up after the Carolina game. That they should have a chance to start getting attendance numbers climbing if they keep winning, and if they keep being interesting and being good. Willat Harris says, I'm really enjoying the Where's Waldo look tonight. Thank you. Got my blue striped shirt on. Don't have my glasses or my red and white hat, but that's okay. Josh Newark says, over under 50% chance of Dior Johnson ever suiting up for the Pitt basketball team. Seems like red shirt screams to me worries about him transferring or entering the NBA, or am I being overly paranoid? I don't think they're redshirting him to try and get him to stay. I don't. I think redshirting him probably increases the likelihood of him leaving more than increasing the likelihood of him staying. I don't think he could go to the NBA. I really don't know. If he left Pitt right now and decided to go in the NBA draft, he would be undrafted. a guy who had red flags coming out of high school, who didn't play at all his freshman year of college, largely stemming from a legal incident. I don't even know where he would end up. And I almost wonder if he were to go into the transfer portal. Let's say he gets fed up with, red shirting, or he gets to the end of the season. He says, I don't want to be here. I'm gonna go transfer. You wonder what kind of options would be out there. He would find a home somewhere. There's 330 Division I teams. He would find a home somewhere. You just wonder at what level, given sort of, again, the red flags and the, kind of areas of concern that exist with him. So, percentage chance that he's on the team next season, I don't know. 50-50? I'm not sure. I think there's that question's always going to be there for any player. And when you have somebody in his situation, it's even a bigger question. David Allen says his biggest memories from 2022 are the awful losses in football, but the great wins in volleyball and soccer. Yeah, that's it's funny, the awful losses in football. I mean, there was one awful loss. The Louisville loss was a bad loss. The awful loss was the Georgia Tech game, and that's the one. That's the big one that got away. In 2019. They had the Miami and the Boston College games. Those were awful losses. Either one, whichever one you want to pick, or both, which is the difference between going 7-5 in the regular season and 9-3. This year, it's the difference between going 8-4 and 9-3. Is an awful loss to Georgia Tech. That was just an inexcusable loss. I mean, absolutely inexcusable. And I argued against this at the time. In the immediate aftermath of the game, I said no. Western Michigan was a worse loss than the Georgia Tech game, because Western Michigan was not a Power 5 team, and Pitt was favored by a lot and all this stuff. But no, Georgia Tech. I think that was the worst loss of the Narduzzi era. I mean, I really do. I mean, the circumstances surrounding that game, with Georgia Tech having just fired its head coach like 5 days earlier. The position Pitt was in and the opportunity they had to sort of capitalize and make kind of a run given what their schedule looked like. and to lose it the way they did. It's not like Georgia Tech played great. Pitt just played like crap offensively and gave up maybe one drive on defense. That was the worst loss. But I don't know if that might be my lasting memory of the season. I'm trying to think. Seasons that had really, really bad losses, were those losses the lasting memory I had of that season? And I mean, I think of like Paul Christ in 2012. Was the Youngstown State game my lasting memory of that season? Probably not, because my first son was born that day. And him being born is the lasting memory of that football season. But as far as games, I mean, the Notre Dame game, quite frankly, the triple overtime game, that game, stands out to me far more than the Youngstown State game. But that's just, my own memories of it. I'm trying to think of other like horrendous losses. 2014 probably was defined by bad losses. Come to think of it, there's that like 6 fumble game against Georgia Tech, missed field goal in overtime game against Duke, and then the bowl game where they gave up 2 onside kick recoveries to blow like a 3 touchdown lead against Houston. Anyway, but yeah, the volleyball wins, the soccer wins. I mean, those were all huge events in Pitt sports, and those would certainly stand out as some of the more memorable events from 2022. Josh Newark says, "Can you give any insight into what's going on with John Hughley?" I can't. I can't. I got nothing more than that. The Sticky Bandit says, "I think this is a good bowl game for Pitt playing against a ranked opponent, but UCLA plays in the Pac-12, the worst Power 5 conference, and even their non-conference games were South Alabama and Bowling Green." Let's see. It'll be interesting. I don't know what to expect. This UCLA team, they went 9-3. They were ranked in the top. They're ranked in the top 20 now. They were ranked in the top 10 at one point. Started off 6-0, got to 8-1, but then they lost 2 in a row. before finishing with a win. Pretty disappointing losses to Arizona and a close loss to USC. I think that it's tricky because I think they're a beatable 9-win team, but at the same time they have a really good offense. And if DTR, if Dorian Thompson-Robinson plays, and if somehow Zach Charbonnet plays, I mean that's going to be really tough to stop. And maybe not, like, you might not even need to shut them down all game. You might play a good game against them defensively and still give up more than your offense can outscore. Because that's probably, so I mean, I know I said that those young players on defense is what interests me most about this game. I'm going to be honest. I'm really interested to see what the offense looks like with Nick Patty at quarterback, because if he goes out and lights it up, I know I talked about how I'm really pulling for Nick Patty. I want to see him have a great finish to his career and all this stuff. But if he goes out and lights it up and the passing game takes off with Nick Patty, you remember when Jerry DePaula asked, it was the Monday press conference after the Tennessee game, and Jerry DePaula asked Pat Narduzzi if it was a mistake to try and run a play at the end of the first half on the play that got Keaton Slovis knocked out of the game. You remember what Pat Narduzzi's answer was to that question? Hide your kids. Kids, earmuffs. Narduzzi said, "I'm a dumbass, Jerry." If Nick Patty goes out and lights it up in this Sun Bowl, plays really well, and the passing game looks better than it looked all year with Keaton Slovis, you might be in line for another "I'm a dumbass" quote, because, yeah. I still think I believe that Narduzzi and Frank Signetti made the decision they felt was best for the team. I think they felt like Keaton Slovis was the best quarterback. But you're going to have, I mean, this is a head-to-head comparison. Aside from Izzy Abanikanda, Nick Patty's going to be playing with largely the same personnel that Keaton Slovis did. So if he goes out and has a better performance than Slovis did over the course of, the season, then might be something to read into there. Let's see here. Josh Newark says, as an alum, I like to think Pitt should always do the morally right thing. So on one hand, I think Dior Johnson should not be on the team. On the other hand, every other program would take him on their team. So why should Pitt play by different self-imposed rules? Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know what the right answer is to that question. I think every program has to make the best decision based on the situation, based on whatever facts there are, based on what they feel is best for their university, best for their athletic department, and best for the, I don't want to say the perception of the athletic department, but I mean, you want to make the best decision to be whatever it is that you want to be. If you want to be win at all costs, if you want to be high moral character, if you want to find a way to win with character or whatever, there's a lot of decisions to make, and I don't think it's necessarily holding yourself to different rules. I think other athletic departments would, decide not to bring someone like Dior Johnson back after what he was, not after what he was accused of, but after what he pled guilty to. I think other athletic departments would make the decision not to bring him back. Maybe even react more strongly than Pitt did. So, everybody's got to make that decision for themselves. And I don't know what the right call is there. Scott Martin says Pitt fans would take Dior Johnson back in a second with any other Jeff Capel team. It's that this one actually has chemistry. That's pretty interesting. I don't think Pitt fans' reaction to it is based on the chemistry issue. I think that's sort of a side topic and a discussion to be had about the basketball side of things. But I think Pitt fans who are saying they don't want Dior Johnson to come back are doing so on moral grounds. That they don't feel like it's right for someone who pled guilty to the things he pled guilty to come back and represent the university and play for the basketball team. I think that's what, the chemistry thing is sort of a side discussion, but I don't think that's where I don't think that's where the objection comes from. Brock Madonic says, how many more transfers do you expect Pitt to add? I think they'll add quite a few. I wouldn't be surprised to see another, I don't know, half dozen. I'm not sure. I think they'll add quite a few. I think more spots will open up on the scholarship roster, and I think they'll bring in transfers to fill it. I think they'll try and get a few other recruits from the 2023 class, but I think they'll also bring in transfers to fill it out as well. Let's see. RJC Man 38. Here you are. Your super chatter says Nick Patty has no place getting the start. This is Pat Narduzzi putting his ego over the program. Well, I don't really understand that. How is Pat Narduzzi putting his ego over the program by starting Nick Patty, the guy he feels gives him the best chance to win? I think while I talk about how it's going to be fun to see these guys who, for the future, I mean, I think you also, if you're going to need to see those guys. Javon McIntyre is going to need to play because they don't have a veteran boundary safety. You're going to need Deion Hayes and Nikai Johnson and Sam Okunlola to play because you don't have John Morgan and Deslin Alexander and Haba Baldonado. Like, you're going to need those younger guys to step in because you don't have anyone ahead of them. In the case of Patty and Yarnell, you're making a decision on who gives you the best chance to win the game. And Narduzzi clearly feels like it's Nick Patty. And look, the reality is, for as enamored as everyone got with Nate Yarnell after the Rhode Island game, or the Western Michigan game, and I'm intrigued as well. Believe me, I'm intrigued. Once Nick Patty was healthy again, he was the backup quarterback. All right, it was never a question of replacing Keaton Slovis with Nate Yarnell. At certain points in the season when Slovis was struggling. That was never going to happen. If Slovis got hurt or needed to come out or the coaches wanted to try something different, it was going to be Nick Patty. He was always the number 2 when he was healthy. When he wasn't healthy, then obviously Yarnell was the backup. But when he was healthy, he was the guy. And so I think the decision to start Nick Patty is a decision that's made to give the team the best chance to win. In Pat Narduzzi's view. If that's ego, I don't really understand it. Let's see. Panther Room says, I don't think Nate Yarnell will be a quarterback at Pitt. They wouldn't have brought in 2 new quarterbacks. And if you go back to the game he played in, the coaches said he exceeded their expectations. I mean, he... I think he did exceed their expectations. I think they were surprised at how well he played and surprised at how he handled himself on the field. But I don't look at what they did this offseason with the transfer portal and high school recruiting as a reflection on Nate Yarnell. I mean, look, if they don't go get Phil Dracovic and Christian Veer and Ty Diefenbach, if they don't go get those guys, Nate Yarnell is the only scholarship quarterback on the roster in the spring. You can't do that. They needed to fill out the room. When Keaton Slovis transferred, Derek Kyler's out of eligibility, and Nick Patty's done. He's either going to transfer or just hang it up. You needed guys. You needed bodies to bring in and remake the quarterback room. And it's not a reflection on Nate Yarnell as much as it's a reflection on the fact that he would have been the only scholarship quarterback in the spring. You need more than one scholarship arm in spring camp. So, I mean, that's what I see out of that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that Nate Yarnell is going to be the starter next year. Phil Dracovic is going to be the starter next year. And Christian Veer is going to be the starter for the 2 years after that, if everything goes according to plan. But, I don't look at all the quarterbacks they brought in this year as being a reflection on Yarnell. Let's see. Brock Madonic says, I'm pretty sure Pat Narduzzi only has one bowl win that I can remember since he's gotten here, 2019 versus Eastern Michigan. Yeah, you're right. I mean, he lost in 2015 to Navy in the Military Bowl, lost in 2016 to Northwestern in the Pinstripe Bowl. 2018, they lost to Stanford in the Sun Bowl. 2019, they won that game against Eastern Michigan. 2021, they lost the Peach Bowl. So, how much is that? 15, 16, 18, 21. He's 1-4. 1-4 in bowl games. 2020, they declined. They just said, we're done. We don't want to be a part of this anymore. The COVID year. So yeah, Narduzzi only has that one bowl win. And quite frankly, I mean, Pitt's last bowl win before that was 2013 when they won the Pizza Bowl. And before that, they won in Birmingham the first time. So, the first time they went to Birmingham. So it's been, sporadic. Since the 2010 season, they've only won 3 bowl games. So they're kind of spaced out there a little bit. RJC Man 38 says, I don't trust Cignetti, and Narduzzi has never put together a stable offensive coaching staff. It's a problem. We're not going to go back to the fact that they set school records for scoring in 2016 and then set them again in 2021. We're not going to go back to the fact that they had a Heisman Trophy finalist and a Biletnikoff Award winner in 2021. We're not going to go back to the fact that they had 2 1,000-yard rushers in 2018. We're not going to go back to the fact that they broke Tony Dorsett's single game rushing record this past season. What else? Look, I mean, Mark Whipple called an offense that won the ACC. Matt Canada called an offense that pretty much single-handedly beat Clemson on the road. And set scoring records in the process that season. Whipple's offense last year broke the scoring records that season. I mean, whatever. Stable offensive staff. I don't know what you mean. Let's see here. Scrolling down. Let's see what else we got here. Just a couple minutes left. Pat O says everyone was ready to run Mark Whipple out of town after year 1. I'll give Cignetti the benefit of the doubt in year 2. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, Mark Whipple's first year, 2019, was pretty bad. It was really bad, actually. Like when I talk about that, Miami and Boston College game being those 2 games being really bad losses, it was on the offense, particularly the Miami game. I think they lost that game 16-12, and then 2 years later, he's calling an offense that wins the ACC and gets a Heisman Trophy finalist and a Biletnikoff Award winner. So you don't write the whole book in the first season, but I think there were some concerning things in this past year. I think there were some things to be a little bit worried about and some things that they're definitely going to have to be better at next year. And if they don't show improvement in some of these key areas in 2023, I think you're gonna have some real questions about Cignetti. Let's see here. Let's see what other comments we got. Will Z says, I am ready to be hurt again by Pitt football. Bring on the Bruins, as even Pitt's water boy has declared for the draft and is foregoing the bowl. Hey, man, you haven't been hurt by Pitt football since, the Carolina game. Watching Carolina right now. If you see me keep glancing off to the side, it's because the Carolina-Oregon game is on, and it's just as many fireworks as I kind of expected it to be. You haven't been hurt by Pitt football in a long time, all right? You got 4 wins in November. The win at Miami, nobody saw that coming. It was a lot of fun to watch. You should have enjoyed that. You should have good vibes right now, and you're going to see the young guys like Javon McIntyre. Everybody's, favorite whipping boy, Keaton Slovis, is gone. Everybody loves Rodney Hammond. They wanted to replace Izzy Abanikanda with Rodney Hammond early in the season. All this. Look, Jared Wayne's still here. Maybe Nick Patty will throw to Gavin Bartholomew. Get excited. Get fired up. It's the Sun Bowl. How can you not be excited for the Sun Bowl? It has never gone wrong for Pitt in the Sun Bowl, right? All right. Well, listen, after the Sun Bowl, we're going to go live. We'll have a live stream post-game show. It's the final one of the year. I have 1 shot of Clayton James left. It looks like 1 shot. If it's more than 1 shot that's in the bottle, we're going to do whatever's in the bottle. Maybe spread out over shots. We're not going to... Well, we might just chug out of the bottle. Depends on how the game goes. But we will be live after that game. If you want to make sure you don't miss it, click the subscribe button. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Turn on notifications. You'll get an alert sent to your phone when we go live for that post-game show. When we go live for our Wednesday night live show every week. When we go live, maybe we'll do some basketball post-game shows. And when we release a new morning Pitt video every weekday, Monday through Friday, we put out right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So if you want to make sure you don't miss any of that content, any of that Pitt video content, subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Turn on notifications and you'll never miss it. While you're here, make sure you like this video and click subscribe. Those things, we really appreciate it. We'll be back, of course, with 2 more morning pits this week. One tomorrow, one Friday. We'll have a live post-game show on Friday. And then we'll keep it going into the new year. So 2022 is almost done. I hope it was a good year for you. We will recap it. That almost sounded like I said wreak havoc. We'll recap 2022 on the morning pit tomorrow, plus talk more about the Dior Johnson news. So there's plenty to discuss there. But thanks for tuning in tonight. Thanks everybody on the live stream. Thanks everybody who likes the video, the super chatters, all the things you guys do every week. We appreciate it. It's a lot of fun to have this. It's a lot of fun having these conversations. It's fun to check in with you every week. So thanks again to everybody who's here on the live stream. Hope you're having a great week. Hope you have a great rest of the week. We'll talk to you Thursday morning with the morning pit, and we'll be live after the game on Friday for the post-game show, our final post-game show of the 2022 season. So make sure you tune in for it. So thanks again to everybody tonight, and we will talk to you live Friday afternoon right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.